that's the number one thing. I think I agree with you on all reading a bunch of your podcasts and watching them, and people don't even know what they're doing on cash versus accrual and just spending money they don't have and not knowing why. Is this fair to our end user, the technicians, right? And you have to be thinking about that within your math, right? Will this actually make impact, and how do we measure it? How do we track it? If not, don't do it. If we can't measure it, we can't track it, and we don't know there's an impact, let's do something else with our time.
What approach do you take to marketing your services to a business customer? All right, welcome back to the Solar Surge Podcast. Hey, if you're new to the Solar Surge Podcast, on this program, we meet with the top business owners, business leaders, and thought leaders in the solar and energy storage space. And on today's program, I have a special guest with me, Nick Sherman. I had a chance to meet him a couple of weeks ago, and he's the CEO of a company called EnergyAid, which does solar service and installation. He's been in the business for a number of years and has a really unique take on what the solar business of the future needs to look like. So Nick, it's good to see you again. Welcome to the Solar Surge Podcast.
You too, Joe. Thanks for having me on. And it's been great to get to know you so far, and excited to get to know you in the future more.
Yeah, me as well. I was really impressed with our first meeting. I know we talked about a number of items that we're going to dig into more today with the audience here. But one of the first things that you said to me on that first call was that, the solar business of 2030 is going to look a lot like the HVAC business today. It's going to be something that every home needs, every home has, and it's going to be more of an ongoing service model than a one and done installation model that we've been accustomed to in the past. So can you explain a little bit more? Why do you say solar is moving from an install model to a service model, and how have you positioned your business to be able to manage that new reality?
Yeah, I think quite simply, EnergyAid was founded for kind of on two investment theses. One, solar will continue to grow, battery, EV, whatever that looks like, 50, 100 years from now. And then two, this is a service-based acquisition model. And what I mean by that is it's similar to HVAC and plumbing, where long-term this industry will acquire its customer base via a $99 unclog your solar system presentation, where you will go out there, fix what their current problem is or try to resolve that issue, build their trust, consumer protection trust, and then from there, be able to acquire that customer, retain them, and to sell them their next system when needed. I think it seems very logical that that's where we're going. When everybody has the properly sized solar system, battery system, and I think that's part of something we're going to talk about here in a minute too, of the $25,000 solar system of 2010 is not the $100,000 solar battery EV system of 2040.
Yep. And it does seem like that's the way that it's going, is that these are no longer separate systems, but the solar, the home battery, the electric vehicle, maybe even the generator, the smart electrical panel, all these are part of the home energy system. And all these things need to be able to work with each other and to talk to each other, which frankly introduces a lot more complexity into the business than what we may have been accustomed to a couple of years ago, where, many installers, it was just about how can I slap as much glass on the roof as quickly as possible and move on to the next job, as opposed to how can I actually take my time and make sure all these different systems are working together. So how are some ways that EnergyAid is able to handle that complexity that maybe other less experienced contractors need to learn, need to adopt if they want to stay competitive and profitable in this new world?
Yeah, I wanted to share a story with you, kind of a case study we did when we first started EnergyAid. And SolarEdge has a find installer network, right? And then on that page, they have installers, batteries, and then service companies. So this was late 2021, early 22. And I went and I found 10 people in Southern California that claimed that they did service. I personally called all 10 myself, right? Of that, 6 didn't do service. They just claimed that because they thought that lead funnel was coming through that and they wanted the opportunity to, hey, you don't need service. Let me sell you another battery, right? 2 of them never even got back to me. None of them picked up the phone in less than a minute, which is very important on service. And the one person that actually did do it wanted to charge me like $900 to come up from San Diego to Orange County. So that's where the industry was. And I'm guessing it's not very far from that today. The consumers have a really hard time finding people that will actually even service systems that weren't installed by themselves. The largest in the market, the Sunruns, the SunPowers, the Sonovas of the market, they won't service systems that aren't their own. That may be changing soon, but it hasn't yet. For multiple reasons. There's just a lot of new opportunities still out there, especially as we talk about kind of that $100,000 system model. Adding batteries, adding solar to their current fleet is probably an easier pick fruit for them. So that's where we kind of see the industry going, Joe. I think some of the hardships people are going to have in the learning curve that we went through, and we were lucky being a repair company first. We didn't do any direct to consumer when we opened. It was all B2B business. We didn't do any new install add-ons, right? We didn't sell add-on batteries and add-on panels, and we didn't monetize our cross-pollination of lead gen at all. We just focused on getting really good at repairs. How do we go diagnose a problem? How do we help people process warranty claims? How do we find a solution to their current problem, which is their existing system? In doing so, how do we get to the point today where we're doing over 500 service appointments at 8 offices with 38 technicians in 2 states? Now we've got 400 boxes for those 550 jobs, and it ends up coming into a logistics business where it's much different, Joe, when you're deploying 4 people to 1 job site versus 1 person to 4 job sites. So, one thing I think I wanted to kind of get across to the audience too is, if you're not dedicated to being a repair service business first, you have no chance. If the C-suite of the larger businesses, if the owners of the smaller businesses don't make this a commitment, you're better off not doing it. It takes dedicated focus. It's completely different than the construction business you're running today. It is a logistics business focused on increasing billable hours and lowering drive time. It's a mathematical problem. You have to pick up the phone in less than 10 seconds, Joe, and you have to have 5-star reviews. So customer service, good customer service, happy techs, pick up your phone quick. You're going to be a pretty successful service company.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I remember you mentioned that on a previous call, that it really becomes more of a logistics business and maximizing billable hours. As it turns out, I had an issue with my air conditioning unit at the house yesterday, and I had to call the service company. I looked on the air conditioning unit first and found that they left their placard there, which I was happy for. I called, they picked up the call within about 3 rings. They had a technician out to the house within 2 hours. And I had no reason to call or go to anybody else. But you can better believe I was going to call and get somebody else out there yesterday because I had a pain point there in the case of my home air conditioning not working. So it's interesting, talking about those metrics. And I know there's a number of other key performance indicators that you use to kind of keep your business on track, make sure that you're operating efficiently. But before we get into that, let's take a step back and kind of paint the backdrop of why there is such a demand for solar service right now. There have been a number of high-profile solar business failures in the past year and a half. We've reported on many of them. Just this morning, we got confirmation that SunPower has entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which means that there's another large batch of abandoned systems out there that are going to need service at some point in the future. And again, for the audience that's not as familiar with the term, when I use the term abandoned system, what I'm talking about is a solar power system that was purchased or financed. It was supposed to come with a 20 or a 25-year warranty, where the original installation contractor was supposed to be on the hook to keep that system healthy and performing over the entire term. But now, if the company's out of business, they're not able to perform their duties under the warranty. And so now the homeowner or the system owner has to seek service from a third-party provider. It could be EnergyAid, it could be others. Nick, what's your take on the current trend of solar business failures and on SunPower in particular? Because I know you've had a relationship with them for some time.
Yeah, we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for SunPower. I want to make that clear. Them and Sunrun were 80% of our work for our first 2 years in business. And we were able to kind of deleverage that with new B2B partners and almost 50% direct to consumer now. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have been able to grow. We wouldn't have been able to learn. They were a key part of our success. We're the #1 service partner in California, Arizona. So it's tragic to see it all. I put some notes earlier to it. It's a tragedy, but it's also reality. We're here, and what we do going forward is all we can control on this. Couple little stats for you. So I talked to one of the heads of service at SunPower a few weeks back, and they told me they have roughly 500,000 systems under asset management. 125,000 of those leases, 375,000 of those will be unsecured cash purchases. So we've got 375,000 people abandoned overnight. That is roughly about 6 to 7% of the market. That is roughly about 25% of the current orphan market. It's a substantial issue. And if we talk about aged solar systems, it's probably closer to 30 to 50% increase in the opportunities of service in the market. So SunPower, which a lot of people don't know, is one of the oldest, biggest. Tesla has more under asset management. Sunrun obviously has more under asset management. Companies like Spruce, Omnidian are popping up in the low hundreds, high 5 digits now. Sonova, probably very close to that SunPower number. But in terms of age systems, I'm willing to bet if you look at systems over 10, 15 years old, SunPower might be #1 ahead of Sunrun in that category. So in terms of service opportunity, I don't think there's much bigger we can talk about in terms of being opened up in the market. What does that mean for the consumer? Probably a lot of similar stories to what I shared earlier, Joe, about calling 10 people from the Solar Edge website and said they do service and they don't. I think if you look back in history about where we've been in similar industries like electrifying America, right? There's trial and error that happened. I'm willing to bet the HVAC industry didn't start as a service industry, right? And it's very much an emergency service industry. If your plumbing or your HVAC isn't working at 1 a.m. in the morning or in the middle of the day in the summer with 100-degree temperatures out, you're not waiting a week to get that fixed. The first one to pick up their phone will get your business. Solar is not quite an emergency service business, but not only, so I think there's 2 factors here, Joe, to really talk about. One is the industry is growing at 30, 40% for the last 20 years. So when you talk about age systems, the age system market is increasing, not slowing down the last couple of years. These systems that were in the market 10 years ago are what we're most likely servicing today. And in doing so, we've got a pretty direct 30, 40% increase for the next 8, 9 years until it hits the NEM 3.0 bubble and interest rate bubble. And at that point, it probably flattens itself out over a 5-year period or some other issue. Second thing is I call it NEM 3.0. Let's be honest, it's all predicated from California and the oversaturation in California and how companies were hurt so bad in their primary market. And it's led to, the Solciuses, Sunluxes of the world, the ADTs, the Titan. Like, you go look at, top companies in 2020, it's like 5 or 6 of the top 20 now gone. I don't think we're done yet. The law of physics, it'll get worse before it gets better. I think people are misleading themselves thinking this is a 12, 18-month solution. Obviously, the election we're going into will have some cause and effect, depending on what side you think that's going to go. I really don't think there's a huge impact to us as a service business. But I do think there's a huge impact to our partners that could be from that. Interest rates, seems likely they come down at one point, but if I had a magic 8 ball, I wouldn't be here in this conversation, Joe. So there's, who knows, right? My guess is it gets worse before it gets better, and it takes longer to come back. But I also will never underestimate the ability for people to survive. If you're voting on someone fighting for their life, their homes, their businesses, it's really hard to vote against that. Not only personally, but people's ability to survive is pretty hard to succumb.
Sure. But, as you've, suggested in many different ways, it's going to be a different business going forward than it has been in the past. You talk about it being a logistics business, things like minimizing drive time, optimizing your efficiency of scheduling and dispatching, all of that thing, telephone answering times. I know you have a number of different metrics that you use to tell if your business is on track. What are some of the unique KPIs or key performance indicators that you need to pay attention to as the head of a service business that maybe you're not even aware of, or it's not a priority for you as an install or construction business?
Yeah, I'm never surprised how stupid I was a year ago. And it's pretty consistent to the point where I just expect myself to be an idiot today. Um, there's three things that really stood out to me in the last few months that somewhat stood out, but didn't really stand out as clear as today. Return on ad spend, like real simple. If your customer acquisition cost is $1 million versus $1, it's a completely different business, right? So understanding, I think this industry continues to forget about what a booking is and what a sale is, right? Now, I want to talk about your cash and versus accrual model, because that's the number one thing I think I agree with you on. All reading a bunch of your podcasts and watching them, and people don't even know what they're doing on cash versus accrual, and just spending money they don't have and not knowing why. It goes back to kind of financial model visibility and not having sophistication, or being able to seek someone they don't know exists yet. But when you get into return on ad spend, we learned a lot about our demographic. Um, in simple math, I'll just tell you about 80% of your purchases come by the coastline in California. 80% of your leased PPAs come in the inland areas. So the higher medium incomes are buying their systems, the low to medium incomes are leasing it. Your inland area is your B2B client, right? The lease and PPA asset managers in the market. And your coastline ends up being your purchase customers, who are the orphan market, that 375,000 SunPower customers. And it's kind of like an 80-20, 20-80 blend of both. It's not completely separate of each other, but the return on ad spend really stood out to us, and how we can lower the customer acquisition cost. People also forget about the booking to sales cycle, so timelines come into effect, especially depending on how fast you grow. Schedulable backlog variance. What does that even mean, right? So there is a teeter-totter, let's call it 1 to 2 weeks of backlog we want to maintain. And not backlog that we're ordering parts on, backlog that we can actually call customers and schedule today to fill our routes. So anything less than a week, we get murdered. We can't make money. Anything more than 2 or 3 weeks, our customers are canceling. We can't get there quick enough. They're finding someone else, and that's even going to have its own downside. So really controlling schedule backlog in every region that we work, and lowering the variance of the teeter-totter of not too much, too much. How do we kind of get into this lower variance fluctuation and stay at a premium area where we're servicing fast enough, but we have enough work to get schedule routes, billable hours increased by lowering drive time density, or lowering drive time with density. So that's kind of the second thing. It's incredibly complicated, Joe. It is not easy. A lot of this stuff really comes down to math. The winners of this game will be mathematicians. Those people that can kind of take the math of Excel spreadsheets or whatever source they're using, the Power BI or whatever it may be, right? And then move that into, how does that make my blue collar workers actually work, right? I can, there's a great story about UPS, and the engineers got involved. We have a great idea of how we're going to lower 30 minutes of drive time every day. We're going to stop giving bathroom breaks. And a week later, all of the drivers quit, right? So
Right.
you have to have a little bit of blue collar common sense in here of, is this fair to our end user, the technicians, right? And you have to be thinking about that within your math, right? Will this actually make impact, and how do we measure it? How do we track it? If not, don't do it. If we can't measure it and we can't track it and we don't know there's an impact, let's do something else with our time. The third thing that really pops up, and probably the most complicated, let me finish off on the scheduled backlog too, Joe. There's only a few ways you can control scheduled backlog. So you're either going to get B2B market or the B2C market. You can control B2B by getting more partners, right? Hat in hand, begging for more work in Arizona, please, right? It's not really a business. But it's still needed in what we're doing today, because it's helped dramatically lower the cost of us going to the market on the direct consumer side because we have another stop on the way between appointment 1 and 3. So we're lowering drive time once again, and it's helping with density. So it complements what we're doing. The levers you can control, hire more text, get rid of text, right? If I have less text, all of a sudden backlog goes up. If I have more text, backlog goes down. So you're kind of turning up these thermometers accordingly. If I market more in an area at certain times, we're trying to target a $250 customer acquisition cost. At certain times, we want to pay $100. At some times, we want to pay $500. So depending if backlog of where it's at, that customer is worth more to us based on where our backlog is. Schedulable backlog, not backlog, right? You can also try to push up and prioritize backlog areas into scheduled backlog. Well, I've got a week of scheduled backlog, but I got 5 weeks of backlog. Let's focus on, lowering our drive time in the North LA market, right? So let's push up that backlog, put our resources onto that to order all that material first today. So you try to use those levers you can control, but the main ones really come down to how you control your marketing. And you can price control too, right? If I charge less, in theory, I'll probably get more customers. If I charge more, I'll probably get less. Sometimes, so like you go into the HVAC market, they'll often actually have adjustable pricing based on backlog. Based on demographic, they'll charge less. You call a certain region, they'll go out and do a $0 unclog your drain because they know you're worth more on the opportunity side. Something Rescue Root or Roto-Rooter is very good at. So there's just a lot of ways to control the schedule backlog. And it seems so overwhelming the first couple of years you're into it. But somewhere around the 20, 30, 40,000 service mark, we started to understand that we need to control the backlog, not let it control us. The third thing's work type variance. I think I gave this analogy, but I want to share it with your audience too, Joe. So when you look at like a UPS, their variance in terms of standard deviation of time is so much lower. So let's say you have 100 boxes that average between 1 and 3 minutes per delivery. 1 minute means you pull up right in front of the house. There's no gate, no dog. You drop it off quick, right? Sign here. 3 minutes, there's a 100-yard walk up to the house. There's a dog. The homeowner doesn't answer it. You can't sign it. You got to sign them all, right? And they just take 3 minutes. They know based on 100 work orders and data, that's pretty likely that the average ticket for the day falls between 1.8 minutes and 2.2 minutes because they have so much of a data pool for variance. So the standard deviation of where they end up in it is so small that they can really build a route and density and know that their drivers should finish like 95% of the time between the 7.5 and 8 hour window. Now I'll give you the reverse of that. Imagine you only have 4 boxes, right? And I want to give the analogy of gutter cleaning business. So you're a gutter cleaning business, you go to 4 work orders and they could be 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. And all you've done is allocate 2 hours for every one. Well, your technicians could be done in 5 hours. They could be done in 15 hours based on those variations. There's huge issues if they're done in 5. There's huge issues if they're done in 15. Joe, if someone finishes in 5 hours, they find a way to make it 8. So there's migration and overcharging, right? It's a weird way how they'll go slower. They'll stop at 7-Eleven a couple more times. The business hasn't really set them up to succeed. It's partially on us as well as the business owners. Let's go the opposite. 15-hour day, and they want to get home in 10 or 12. Well, what's going to happen? Quality is lower. They'll have more reschedules. They'll have more safety. They'll be driving 85 on the freeway when they shouldn't be. A lot of things will happen for them to migrate to 12 hours in that day. So there's issues on too much and too little. Well, how do we end up between an 8-hour, 9-hour, 10-hour, whatever your sweet spot is, right? How do we get them into a lower variance window? Well, here's how we do so. Not all homes take 2 hours. Let's put homes that are 0 to 2,000 square foot and say they take 1 hour, 60 minutes. Homes that are 2 to 4,000 square feet, we're going to say they take 2 hours. And homes that are 4,000 and up, we're going to say they take 3 hours. So just by doing that work type time allotment, we've now taken what can end up between 5 and 15 hours down to what can end up between 7 and 11, right? So we're looking heavily at about 440 different work types. And I want to kind of explain how we put these together. So look at like biology where you have family, species, subspecies. It's kind of like a biology thing. We have install, inspect, troubleshoot, repair. We have all these master categories of family. Then we have, well, what are we inspecting? Are we inspecting conduit? Are we inspecting wiring, J boxes? Are we inspecting the panels? Inverter, microinverter, single, standard, not a microinverter, but a single inverter, like a centralized inverter. So we break all that out, and then is it Enphase? Is it Tesla? Is it LG? Is it what manufacturer it is? And we end up with kind of work type and work plans, but we also end up with a 440 different possible work types. Well, that's incredibly complicated, but it's incredibly important to really break into the micro understandings of time allotments. Now we're actually breaking into time allotments based on, do we have a sample size of 30 more over a period of time? And we're adjusting the time allotments down to almost a minute. We're down to 5-minute windows, working on a minute windows based on actual data from our field and time allotments and GPS audits. So we know that a internet connection disruption, a non-coms, averages 52 minutes, averages 68 minutes, averages 94 minutes, right? We're also getting to the point where we're looking at technician efficiency. We give them 60 minutes. The average technician takes 60 minutes. John takes 50. Kevin takes 70. Well, how do we get John more than 40 hours of work a week, and how do we get Kevin to stop getting 60? Right? How do we balance that out? John should be getting more work, and Kevin should be getting less, and Kevin should be getting some training. Whatever John's doing, we want Kevin to do. So, really starting to understand the work type time allotment variation and how granular we have to get with it to really not have that gutter cleaning 5 to 15 hour window, and a lot of bad things happen with that. So Joe, kind of going back to the return on ad spend, the schedule backlog variance, and work type time allotment variance. These are going to be really incredibly tough things for the average contractor to fathom or understand. So let me kind of break it down to what are the key starting points before you learn more about the business. Pick up your phones in less than 10 seconds, right? Put in some type of customer service system that gives you feedback from the field so you can improve the consumer experience. That'll have a bigger impact than what we're doing on this stuff. And really keep an eye on your marketing spend. The average new service business focuses on those three things. They'll buy themselves some time to learn the other things.
That makes sense. So, return on ad spend is one that I heard you mention multiple times, or cost of acquisition, which we focus a lot on in solar sales for sure. Now, you touched on two different categories of customer, right? You've got your B2B customer, which I know you mentioned GoodLeap is a big customer of yours. SunPower potentially was or is a big customer of yours, as well as your direct-to-consumer marketing. So let's break each of those down. What approach do you take to marketing your services to a business customer? A company like GoodLeap that I presume is calling you because the original contractors have gone out of business and they need you to maintain their fleet of finance systems. Can you explain a little bit about how does that work?
Yeah, so most of our lease PPA asset managers, the largest installers that run lease PPA portfolios, you can name those top 5, right? We have installers that we help out, a handful of installers that are our partners that just have systems they installed in areas they can't really get to. It's not cost effective. And we have so much density in the outside, within 60 miles, their office outside of that we're able to help them better than they can help themselves. So just financially makes sense for them to use us. And finance companies, I'll dig into detail a bunch on that. Manufacturers, we've had battery recalls we've gone through. There's consistent, customer satisfaction that they go out, even though they're not really liable for it. They go out because of the brand and help take out care of issues. The big one that's really popped up in the last year is the finance partners, and it's been dramatically increased. And you guys in the market know who these people are. The GoodLeap's, Mosaic, Sunlight, right? Enium's one of them, Enfin. There's a ton of these big finance companies. It's not so much old Lone Pal and GoodLeap and Mosaic and Sunlight. There's 6 or 7 key ones now. And the problem they're having is they kind of have a threefold issue. One is signed contracts that never got to glass or panels on the roof, and they're kind of having to walk away from those projects or finding solutions in the future, which may be having more control of that process, like you've mentioned in other podcasts, Joe, which I think is very likely. The second one is panels on the roof, no PTO. That's the mid-abandoned project. And there's obviously a ton of issues there. They paid some type of M1 payment, and they've got to complete the job to be able to get the rest of their funding from the Wells Fargos and Chase Banks of the world. The third issue is post PTO. Titan was a big push on that, and SunPower. I don't know if Goodleap hasn't worked with them, but some will be affected by this one way or another. And it's the ongoing market of it. But people that systems aren't working are less likely to pay their bills, right? They have some type of resent. Kind of going back to the consumer in general. Every one of our customers on the direct consumer side is a 1-star customer. They come to us because someone on the solar side. I've been in the home myself, and I've swallowed the pill too, Joe. I told people for years these systems would never break down. 25-year warranties. It's the easy bake oven. Set it and forget it. And it wasn't right. It wasn't right. And looking back on it, once again, I feel like an idiot. Right? I'll probably be an idiot again. So on the direct to the finance partner side, Joe, their biggest issue is really cleaning up the mid abandoned. They panels on a roof. We help out a bunch of these finance companies come in. We've had to build out design, permitting, inspection, MPUs, and all of that. And it basically got into a project work, kind of like the installer side. Good news is we've kind of built that out second, and it complements our service side, which is our primary business. Long term, the whole point of service is to sell add-ons, right? Or new systems or their second system, right? So going out and doing an inspection and charging $99, whatever your fee is to come out and inspect the system, and then charging a customer $1,000, $1,500, $200, $2,000, whatever it is to fix the system. The whole point of doing that is to be there when they want more. You have a $25,000 solar system. You're getting EV car chargers, his and her car charger put in. Are you looking at adding more panels to cover that new load? What about batteries, right? So you really want to be their one-stop shop. That's a better consumer journey. And, that's what EnergyAid is trying to do long-term as well. And the service industry should be focused around that. I think kind of the one thing that helps protect us is it's not emergency service yet. Otherwise, the rescue routers, serve pros of the world would come in and eat us alive. These service companies are conglomerates that pick up the phone in 3 seconds, have 5-star ratings, fire people for a 1-star, and really know how to monetize their customer base. We have no chance if these guys if this industry becomes emergency service, and we're not prepared for that. So I think that's some of the stuff that I'm seeing, Joe.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great. And that actually leads me to another question, which is, the solar and home energy technology now has evolved to where these are no longer isolated systems. But if you're talking about solar on the roof, you're talking about home battery storage, electric vehicle charging. Of course, now electric vehicle charging is about to be bi-directional, where you can charge the vehicle from the home, or you can pull from the vehicle to have backup power in the home, or maybe even to sell to the power company under certain conditions. You've got smart home panel load control systems like SPAN and Savant. You've got people that are switching from natural gas-based or propane-based home heating to electric heat pump systems. You've got people that want to tie a generator into their solar battery system as well. So it's like all of these different systems now have to talk to each other. They have to work with each other. It's more complex. It's more risk. I mean, I can tell you my days as a contractor, maybe being too much on the bleeding edge of selling a lot of these brand new battery systems when they first came out, we took a lot of losses taking on the risk of installing these systems on a firm fixed price basis. And we didn't really know what the true cost was until it was too late and we were on the other side and we had to deal with the loss. But I think, as you touched on, there is an upsell opportunity here if you can manage all of that, right? Somebody who already has solar is probably more likely to upgrade more solar. more likely to add an electric vehicle, more likely to add some of these other home electrification solutions. What advice would you give to contractors as to how to manage the complexity of all of that so that they stay profitable throughout the entire process?
Yeah, I've got a little twist for you too. What about the grid just financially coercing us to have to, right? So if rates were 4x in 20 years, there's a lot of people are going to be forced financially to do so. Kind of go back to I want to get a little tangent with the EV bidirectional with you, if you don't mind, real quick. I have a little bit of OCD, and I'm willing to bet that I will never let a bidirectional car be plugged in just because I'll lose sleep thinking my car's going to be empty when I need to get to work in the morning. We've had a lot of these conversations about what does the EV market look like. When you go to a Target, you have 500 parking spots and you have 50 handicap, which is like 50 of the 75 stalls that get used on a day-to-day basis. And it's all because of that Christmas rush that happens, right? I don't think you're going to have 500 EV car chargers out of 500 Target. You may have 20 versus the 10 they have today. And I think when you start to get the range of the vehicles up to 500, 600, 700 miles, or even 400, 500 on a consistent basis, I think you're going to find that people just plug in at home every night. I think I can put within one hand how many times I didn't sleep in my own bed in the last year, right? So it's very likely that my car isn't charged if it's at my home, or I'm going to need to charge it somewhere else, or I'm going to need more than 400 miles, right? So I want to ask you a question of, do you really think the bidirectional vehicles fueling the home is actually going to, I kind of look at it like as the Tesla and SunPower roof tile. It was a great concept until everybody realized you couldn't service them. As soon as they go bad, it doesn't make sense to service 1 out of 1,000 tiles. I kind of think this bidirectional thing, people are just going to go put more batteries in their home and not worry about it.
Well, I think the big thing is here, and this is particularly amongst solar and energy storage enthusiasts, right? So I see a lot of the comments that coming in on the YouTube channel, is that consumers recognize that the cost per kilowatt hour that they pay for energy storage in their electric vehicle is several times lower, or just a fraction of what they pay per kilowatt hour for a stationary home battery. And so they want to be able to tap into that, especially in blackout conditions. I think that's where you're going to find the most acute need for it is when you're in a grid blackout. There's an electric vehicle there. The homeowner might say, hey, I'm willing to tap into up to half or 3/4 of my electric vehicle battery storage if that allows me to keep the lights on in the house for a couple of days. Now, you touched on this concept of emergency service earlier, and that's kind of what led me to think that is that right now, if you lose a net metered solar power system, you can afford to be down for 1 or 2 weeks because it's not affecting your lifestyle. You're just going to have a little bit more electric bill to pay at the end of the month. But if you have an integrated home battery electric vehicle system and something malfunctions and you lose power to part of your home, now it is an emergency situation. And maybe it's something as simple as going out there and flipping the bypass switch in the controller. But if that's not something the homeowner is willing or able to do themselves, you now have an emergency sort of urgent need situation where like, hey, I need somebody out here today. And I think as these systems become more and more complex, you have more of that risk of it now goes from a nice to have technology to more of an always on utility that it's assumed it's always going to be there and functioning. And if it's not, I want somebody out there to fix it right away. Your thoughts?
Yeah. It seems likely that we're doubling the load the next 20 years, one way or another. That's robots plugged in to mow our lawn, or like the Molly Robusta thing that goes around your house and cleans all this stuff up, and when you're not in the middle of the day. 4 iPads per home, 3 iPhones per home. I think that the his and her car charger is a big driver of this the next 10, 20 years. I think when you look at some of the data, I say it's like 4,000 kilowatt hours per vehicle or something per year. Well, the average home uses 10 or 12,000. That's a 60% increase. And there's not enough 400 amp panels installed out there to handle that load increase too. So there'll be a bunch of little Band-Aid devices like plugging into your washer and dryer, or this one bidirectional switches. But the reality is, a lot of the homes from 1970 before were built with underground feeds that can't go above 100 amp. So there's going to be a huge infrastructure issue. A lot of the utilities like Southern California Edison, I saw an ad the other day about how they're getting ahead of the main panel upgrade issue that's going to be happening. They're starting to pay incentives to do it now versus 10, 15 years from now. So they see that spike and they've gotten ahead of it, which is great to see. There's a lot of things that can change, Joe. I think it's likely we're doubling our load. My best guess is we're going to be underprepared for that. Does that lead into a apocalyptic kind of lifestyle where we have no every day we're like Puerto Rico and lights go off 4 times a day? I doubt that. But there'll be a lot of maneuvering quickly and mistakes made, and but I think it's very likely that we are on-site production, on-site storage, 1.7 to 2 car chargers per home. Don't get me started on how many divorces will happen for people who only have 1 car charger. That's a whole nother market. It's going to open up on the lawyer side. But yeah, I think you're right, Joe. I think that's the inevitable future. And, the question is, when do you make that transition to the future? And usually if you're doing it when it's here, you're too late.
Sure. Well, it's coming, right? It's coming. And I think one thing is for sure that companies that want to continue to be in this business need to evolve. They need to adapt. They need to learn from guys like you who have, really done the homework and really, a lot of attention to detail, as you said, this is going to be a lot like the HVAC business where everybody needs this service. To some extent, everybody needs it. There's going to be a lot more competition. And so a lot of the basic fundamentals, blocking and tackling and how you run your business on a day-to-day basis is going to play a larger role in the companies that are successful and those that aren't. Nick, while we still have a little bit of time left, can you tell us any other future trends that you see on the horizon, things that solar contractors or solar professionals need to be planning for now? Where do you see things going?
Well, I think it's inevitable when we start to get up that double load that energy home management becomes a big part of it. I really like, if I wasn't doing solar service, I'd be doing what SPAN is doing on the smart home load centers. So I'll give you the way I explain SPAN to internal and external people. Imagine your light bulb's going to go out next Wednesday, and on Tuesday, 2 light bulbs show up at your front doorstep. Right, the consumer power, the protection and the purchasing and control of home consumer appliances, and the data they're going to have is just going to be very powerful. I think we need to start thinking about how we tie in energy efficiency to this puzzle. I think the smart home load centers are a big starting point of that, because I'm a big advocate of the first step to any solution is visibility, right? If you don't know what you're fixing, you got pretty unlikely to fix it. So those are something we're kind of looking at. I think it's really important, Joe, to stay hyper-focused. And I give the analogy of I've never had the best steak ever or the best fries at a buffet. And I think this industry tends to want to be a buffet model, and they end up getting good at nothing. But I think if you look at history, it pays really well to be good at a few things or less, or one thing. So we're trying to get really good at service, right? That's one of our goals. And, customer service, picking up the phones, quality. And I think this industry, like, I'll give you one of the kind of shiny objects that we've looked at, EV, right? We've brought solar and batteries into our day-to-day line. All of our technicians get certified in the top 5 batteries: LG, Tesla, Franklin, Enphase, SolarEdge. That's the first 3 days of their training. They take all their classes. And in doing so, the batteries here in California are much more prevalent than they are in other areas, and a whole nother service industry is kind of being created under the solar shell. So solar and batteries are a necessity for our B2B and B2C clients, and we're already doing that today. EV feels like the third leg. But I think there's a timing for that. It's not going to go away. There's not going to be a missed opportunity there. And we'll always be able to monetize our customer base through that. I think one of the things that the timing will come when we're really good at what we do on solar and batteries. And we're losing the customer experience because we don't have EV. So when not having EV hurts us more than having it, that's the time to do it. And I think we tend to hit revenue walls in our heads. We've done it here at EnergyAid multiple times. We get to this, $30,000 a week. Like, where are we going to get more solar service work? We get to $80,000 a week. Where are we going to get more solar service work? And then we break through this wall, and it's like the TAM just unlimited. And we keep doing it. We hit this next step, and the theme is we always find a way to open up more TAM, and I don't think that's going to change. There's multiple ways. I think some of the things that we're seeing, real estate inspections is something we've looked at and not ready yet, but kind of like back to your HVAC, Joe. Did you have the HVAC installed yourself, or was it there when you bought the home?
Well, in this case, it was a brand new unit with the home. So this was, I think, the first time it's ever been serviced.
If you didn't have a sticker, you would have no idea who installed that, right? You're an abandoned customer via new home purchase. Just because you don't know better, right? So the abandoned is a few things. It's companies out of business, manufacturers out of business. Good old fashioned, I'm never using them again. I don't care how many warranties they give me. I'm not calling those guys again. They don't pick up their phone in less than 10 seconds. And then fourth is the new home ownership. So the real estate inspection market, I think something's really going to pop up. Something that's been hard. We've tried the last year or so, and we've kind of dipped out of. It's more of a long-term play. With the volatility in the market, we've got to be short-term focused right now. We're seeing finance companies that are requiring third-party verification post-PTO at the new installation. I don't know how much I share names and stuff, but I think I can share this one. Enfin's working with a company to do nationwide. And I think this is actually great for everybody. The consumer has the opportunity to know that everything that was told I was sold is not only installed, the right panels, the right inverter. And I can assure you, Joe, there's been a lot of fraud the last couple of years. People get really desperate when they're chasing those M2 payments, M1 payments. And there's been a lot of wrong panels, wrong equipment installed. We had a job where they said they put 19, they put 13 panels. So consumer protection is needed now. And this happens. It's really easy to modify a photo and say, yeah, that's the Smith residence and 222 John Wayne Drive in Alabama. How do I know? How do I know that's the right photo? You don't. So they're getting third parties involved to go out and actually do a survey. Great for the consumer, great for the finance company. It's actually really good for the installers. Imagine being able to go to your customer and say, that bad news you've heard about fraud and all these bad happenings. So we partnered with Joe Financing because they hold us accountable. And here's how they hold us accountable. They've got a third party that's going to come out here and inspect your system before we get paid. So everything that we're telling you has to happen or we don't get funded. I can assure you it's going to happen. So there's a great pitch in the home to provide that consumer and that trust up front and tell people that we're held accountable. I think that's a positive, not a negative, for a very small fee, right? So those are some of the things that opens up more of the service opportunity early before the service need is there. Those same technicians that can service systems can now go and do those inspections to new systems that don't need service work. You look at the real estate side, right? You can go provide a report. There's a bunch of little opportunities there in terms of what you provide in terms of asset versus liability. At a certain point, 15, 20 years in, these systems aren't going to last 25 years, Joe. Like, who drives their car 200,000 miles? Nobody. Like, 3 people in, some suburb in Alabama, right? Like, it just doesn't happen because there's so many issues after 100,000 miles, and no one's going to give you a 200,000 mile warranty. So all these leases and PPAs, there's going to be early buyouts 15, 20 years in. At a certain point, the liability is not going to be worth the asset. And what do you do at that point? Remove and reinstalls are very expensive. They're not going to want to pull these off your home and repatch your roof. That's 10, 15 grand. They're going to want to leave the racking, leave the penetration, do as minimal adjustments, and throw new equipment, new panel, new inverter on that ideally. That'd be the perfect situation for them. But I think you kind of have roofing and solar starting to align as an industry as well. And I think it gets to the point where you just redo your roof or redo your solar system every 20 years. That's where I think we end up.
Yeah. No,
So,
I would agree. I would agree. I mean, the cost and, just the cumbersomeness of trying to, remove, reinstall, and you're reinstalling equipment that's already obsolete, right? So,
yep.
yeah, I get it. Well, Nick, this has been a great conversation with you. I look forward to stay in touch with you in the future and see how your business progresses. Folks, again, this has been a chat with Nick Sherman, CEO of EnergyAid, and talking about how solar is evolving into a service-based business as opposed to a one-and-done install business. Folks, again, that's why we have the Solar Surge podcast here, so that thought leaders in the space, people that are running successful solar companies in the space, can share their experience and their expertise with you, so that you can apply this in your business and hopefully turn things around or get prepared for what the solar market of the future looks like, so that you can remain competitive. But that pretty much does it for today's episode. Guys, I thank you for spending some more time on the Solar Surge podcast channel. And until next time, of course, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.